Proposed to my girlfriend of 4 years. She said no. Then my sister exposed her biggest secret. Hello, read it. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Before Lauren said no, I thought my life was on track. I had a stable job, a woman I loved, and a future that seemed clear. I believed in the kind of love that was steady and unwavering, the kind that made you feel safe. That's what I had been working toward for years, building something permanent, something that would last. After she said no, everything I thought I knew collapsed. I'm Daniel, and I'm 28 years old. I've never been the type to rush into things. Maybe that's why, even in the early days of my relationship with Lauren, I never pressure her into big commitments. I wanted to take my time to make sure we were right for each other. And for 4 years, it seemed like we were. We met at a mutual friend's party. I remember noticing her immediately, not because she was the loudest person in the room, but because she wasn't. While everyone else was busy talking over each other, Lauren had this quiet confidence about her. She didn't need to fight for attention. People gravitated toward her naturally. That night, we talked for hours. She told me about her love for literature, her dream of writing a novel one day, the way she hated small talk but could get lost in deep conversations. I was hooked. It wasn't one of those whirlwind, love-at-first-sight relationships. It was steady, slow, and natural, something that felt real. We moved in together after 2 years, and by year 3, I was sure she was the one. She fit into my life effortlessly. My friends liked her. My parents adored her. Even my younger sister, Emily, who was usually skeptical of the women I dated, didn't outright dislike her. But looking back, there were signs, small things at first. The way she avoided talking about marriage, brushing off the topic whenever it came up. The way she hesitated when people assumed we were headed in that direction. At the time, I chalked it up to nerves. Not everyone grew up with the kind of stable, long-lasting love my parents had. I figured she just needed time, so I waited. And then, one night, I decided I wasn't going to wait any longer. The proposal wasn't a grand event. Lauren wasn't the kind of person who wanted something extravagant, so I planned something simple but meaningful. Our favorite restaurant. A private table in the courtyard, with lanterns casting a soft glow around us. The same place where we had celebrated our first anniversary. I had picked out a sapphire ring because she had once mentioned how much she loved them, how she thought diamonds were too predictable. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. I remember every detail of that moment with painful clarity. I had just finished telling her how much she meant to me, how I couldn't imagine a future without her. And when I got down on one knee, my heart was steady. I wasn't nervous because I thought I already knew the answer. But the moment I opened the ring box, I saw it. Not excitement, not shock, not the kind of overwhelming emotion you expect in a moment like that. Just silence. And then, slowly, she shook her head. I thought, hoped, maybe I had imagined it, that maybe she was just stunned. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't even conflicted. She had already made this decision. I stayed on one knee longer than I should have, long enough for the weight of her rejection to settle in my chest like a stone. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to understand, but she didn't give me the chance. She stood up, placed her napkin down on the table, and walked away. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. I sat there for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably just minutes. The restaurant was filled with whispers. People avoided my gaze, pretending not to have witnessed what had just happened. Eventually, I stood up, left the restaurant, drove home. I half expected to find her there, waiting for me, ready to explain. But the apartment was empty. Her coat was gone from the hook by the door. I called her. No answer. I texted her. No response. For the first few days, I was in denial. I convinced myself that she just needed space, that maybe she was overwhelmed. But as the days turned into a full week of silence, I started to accept the truth. She wasn't coming back. That was the hardest part, the not knowing, the complete lack of explanation. If she had been angry, if we had fought, if something had happened, then maybe I could have made sense of it. But there was nothing, just an empty apartment filled with reminders of a future that would never happen. My friends tried to comfort me in the way people do when they don't really know what to say. They told me I'd find someone else, that she wasn't the right one, that maybe she had done me a favor. But none of that helped because none of it made sense. I kept thinking about all the little moments, the times she had seemed happy, the nights we had stayed up late talking about the future. Had it all been a lie? Had I been fooling myself this entire time? I would have spent the rest of my life wondering why if it hadn't been for Emily. My sister wasn't the type to stay quiet when she sensed something was wrong. She had always been protective of me in a way that went beyond typical sibling concern. And she had never fully trusted Lauren. I used to brush it off, thinking she was just being overly critical. But after the failed proposal, after Lauren disappeared without a trace, Emily started digging. At first, I didn't understand why she was so determined. I told her to drop it, to let it go. But she wouldn't. She said something didn't add up, that there had to be a reason. I wanted to believe there wasn't. I wanted to believe Lauren had simply changed her mind, that people fell out of love sometimes, even when they didn't mean to. But the truth was so much worse than that. When Emily finally uncovered what Lauren had been hiding, everything fell into place. Lauren hadn't just left. She had never truly been mine to begin with. The days after the proposal were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, barely aware of my surroundings, barely aware of time passing at all. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it brought dreams that twisted reality. Dreams where Lauren had said yes, where she had smiled and thrown her arms around me, where we were still us. Waking up was worse than never sleeping at all. I would jolt back into consciousness with the same crushing realization every morning. She was gone, and she had left without giving me a reason. That was the part that gnawed at me the most, the complete lack of closure. I would have rather heard anger or regret, even indifference, but she had walked away with nothing. No te has, no hesitaste, no explanaste. I wasn't myself in those weeks after she left. I didn't answer calls from friends who wanted to check in, didn't go out, didn't try to distract myself with work. The apartment was still filled with traces of her, and even though I told myself I should start clearing them out, I couldn't. Her books were still on the shelf, her favorite mug still sitting in the sink where she had last used it. Her shampoo still sat in the shower, untouched. I knew I was clinging to something that was already gone, but I couldn't seem to help it. The absence of answers kept me stuck in place, searching for meaning in moments that no longer mattered. Emily was the first person who forced me to snap out of it. She had always been the kind of person who saw through facades, who never let emotions cloud her judgment. She had never been particularly fond of Lauren, but she had also never interfered, keeping her thoughts to herself except for the occasional skeptical glance or quiet hesitation when Lauren's name came up. She hadn't been there the night of the proposal, but she had heard what happened, and unlike my other friends who tried to console me with empty words about how I would find someone else, Emily wasn't interested in comforting me. She was interested in finding out why. At first, I didn't pay much attention to her suspicions. I told myself she was just looking for a reason to justify her dislike of Lauren, that she wanted to prove she had been right all along. But she was persistent. She had always been the type who refused to let things go when something didn't make sense. And to her, Lauren's disappearance made no sense at all. The way she had left, so emotionless, so detached, it wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind of reaction someone had when they ended a 4-year relationship. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something else. I didn't want to listen at first. It was easier to believe that Lauren had simply fallen out of love, that she had walked away because she didn't feel the same way anymore. But deep down, even before Emily started digging, I knew that wasn't true. The pieces didn't fit, and the longer I sat alone in the empty apartment, the more I realized I had been ignoring the signs for a long time. The way Lauren had always avoided conversations about the future, how she had deflected when people asked when we would get married, how her answers had always been vague and distant. I had told myself it was because she was nervous about commitment, that she just needed more time. But now, looking back, I saw it for what it really was: hesitation, doubt, maybe even guilt. When Emily finally came to me with what she had found, I wasn't ready for it. I had convinced myself that whatever answers existed wouldn't change anything, that knowing the truth wouldn't make me feel any better. But the moment I saw the look on her face, I knew I had been wrong. Because this wasn't just about Lauren leaving. This wasn't just about a breakup. What Emily had uncovered was something much worse. Lauren hadn't just left me. She had been hiding something from the very beginning, something that made every moment of our 4 years together feel like a lie. And the worst part was that I never saw it. I had spent all those years believing I was building a life with someone who loved me back, never realizing that I was just a temporary placeholder, someone she had never planned on staying with forever. And now, as I stood there listening to the truth unravel, I realized I had never really known her at all. Emily didn't speak right away. She just stood there, watching me, waiting for me to acknowledge that I was ready to hear whatever she had discovered. But I wasn't ready. I don't think I ever could have been. Even then, as the days stretched into weeks and the weight of Lauren's absence settled into something permanent, some part of me still clung to the belief that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she had doubts about marriage. Maybe she had personal struggles she never voiced. Maybe she had panicked and made a rash decision that she would eventually regret. Those were all things I could have accepted. What I wasn't prepared for was the truth. That Lauren had never been who I thought she was, and that our relationship had been built on nothing but carefully constructed lies. When Emily finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual, missing that sharp, confident edge she always carried. She told me she had been looking into Lauren's life, not in a way that was obsessive or intrusive, but because something about the way she left didn't sit right. People don't just walk away from 4-year relationships without a word, without a single sign of regret. That kind of exit meant something was being hidden, and Emily wasn't the kind of person to ignore it. She started with the simple things: Lauren's social media, her old friends, details that most people would have overlooked. Lauren had never been the type to post much about her personal life, which was why I never thought twice about the fact that she rarely shared pictures of us together. But Emily had noticed, even before all of this, that Lauren had a habit of keeping her digital presence vague, carefully curated. And now, after everything, it felt deliberate. Like she had been keeping her life compartmentalized. Like she had been keeping me compartmentalized. Then Emily found something that changed everything. A name. A man. Someone Lauren had been connected to long before she met me. Someone I had never heard of, never seen, never even suspected existed. But he wasn't just a friend or an ex-boyfriend from the past. He was something much worse. Someone who had never left her life. Not in the 4 years she had spent with me. Not even when we had moved in together. Not even when I had been foolish enough to believe she was my future. The discovery unraveled everything I thought I knew. Emily didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to soften the blow. She told me the truth as it was, as raw and undeniable as the evidence she had found. Lauren had been in a relationship with another man the entire time we had been together. Not just casually, not just before me, during our 4 years together. She had never broken it off, never chosen one life over the other. Instead, she had maintained both, weaving lies so seamlessly that neither of us had suspected a thing. I sat there, silent, as the weight of it pressed down on me. I tried to piece together the past, tried to pinpoint the signs I had missed, the moments that should have told me what was happening. But there was nothing. Lauren had been careful. Too careful. She had built our life together with precision, making sure I never had a reason to question anything. The truth was sickening. I wasn't just a failed relationship to her. I had been one of 2 lives she had been living, and when the time came for her to choose, she hadn't hesitated. She had simply walked away. No guilt, no hesitation, no looking back. But there was something worse. Emily hesitated before telling me the final piece of it, as if gauging whether I could handle it. But at that point, I had already fallen too far down the abyss of betrayal for anything to truly surprise me anymore. When she finally spoke, her words cut deeper than anything else had. Lauren hadn't just been in another relationship. She had been engaged to him. The night I proposed, when she shook her head and walked away from me without a second thought, she had already promised herself to someone else. She hadn't been unsure, hadn't been overwhelmed with emotion. She had already made her choice. I had been nothing more than a safety net, a placeholder, something she had held on to until she no longer needed me. I thought I had been building a life with the woman I loved. I had just been the backup plan. I didn't remember much after Emily left that night. I must have thanked her, must have told her I needed time to process everything. But when the door closed and I was left alone in that empty apartment, it no longer felt like a home. It felt like a crime scene, A place where every piece of furniture, every photograph, every trace of Lauren's presence had been part of a long, drawn-out deception. I should have felt anger, but all I felt was numbness. Lauren had never been mine to begin with, and now she was gone for good. Betrayal has a way of reshaping everything you thought you knew about yourself. It forces you to look at the past with new eyes, dissecting every conversation, every moment, every choice, searching for the signs you missed. After Emily revealed the truth about Lauren's double life, the numbness I had felt in the beginning didn't last. It transformed into something colder, sharper, an all-consuming need for answers. Days passed in a haze, my mind cycling through every interaction I'd ever had with Lauren, searching for the cracks in the foundation I had once thought was so solid. I scrolled through old messages, reread our emails, replayed every significant moment in my head. The evidence of her deception was everywhere now, in the little things I had brushed off as normal, in the subtle shifts in her behavior that I had once excused. The late nights spent working, the sudden weekend trips to visit family that she never invited me to, the time she had been on edge when her phone buzzed, silencing it with quick, dismissive movements. I had ignored it all, but now that I knew the truth, I wanted more than just awareness. I wanted to see for myself what kind of life Lauren had built without me, the life I had unknowingly been the shadow to. So I did something I never thought I would. I searched for him, the other man, the real fiancé, the one she had chosen over me without hesitation. It didn't take long to find him. His name was Ryan. His social media was polished, full of curated posts of his travels, his accomplishments, and most recently his engagement. There it was, staring back at me through my screen, a photo of Lauren, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, her left hand prominently displaying a diamond ring that was not the one I had carefully picked out for her. The caption made my stomach twist. She said yes. Can't wait to spend forever with this incredible woman. The timestamp was what made my blood run cold. 2 weeks before I had proposed, while I had been finalizing my plans, while I had been picking out a ring that I thought she would love, Lauren had already accepted someone else's proposal. She had smiled for that photo, posed for those congratulatory comments, all while knowing I was still waiting for her to come home, still believing she was mine. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. I had expected to feel anger, but what filled me instead was something heavier, something deeper, a bitter understanding that I had been nothing to her. I wasn't even worth a real goodbye. I was just an obligation she had finally freed herself from. But there was still one question that wouldn't let me rest. Had she ever planned to tell me? Or had she been hoping I would just let her slip away, her betrayal buried under the pretense of a normal breakup? Had she walked out that night knowing that I would eventually stop looking for answers, that I would simply accept that she had left and move on? Emily had warned me not to dwell, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know how deep the deception had gone. That was how I found myself standing outside a cafe one afternoon, waiting. I knew Lauren's habits. I knew where she got her coffee, knew how she hated making it at home because she thought store-bought lattes always tasted better. I knew that if I waited long enough, she would show up. And she did. She looked the same, but different. Lighter, unburdened, as if she had stepped into a life that had always been waiting for her, one that had never included me. There was no hesitation in her movements, no signs of remorse or guilt, just confidence. And she wasn't alone. Ryan was with her. They sat at a corner table, leaning close as they spoke, their hands intertwined in a way that made my stomach churn. Watching them, I realized something that made my pulse spike with fury. She had never hidden him. He wasn't some secret kept in the shadows, some shameful affair she had carried behind closed doors. He had been right there, living a parallel life to mine, except he had been given all the things she had denied me. I should have left. I should have turned away and walked out before she saw me, but something inside me rebelled against that instinct. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the raw need to know if she felt anything at all when she looked at me. So I didn't move. And then it happened. Lauren's gaze drifted absent-mindedly over the cafe, and for a fraction of a second, our eyes met. It was brief, a flicker of recognition, a moment where her expression shifted, Not to shock, not to guilt, but something else entirely. Annoyance. As if I was an inconvenience, an unwanted reminder of something she had already decided to forget. That was the moment it clicked. Lauren had never feared getting caught. She had never worried about hurting me. She had never hesitated because, in her mind, I was insignificant. I was the past, and she had erased me so cleanly from her life that even now, face to face, she didn't flinch. I turned away before I could give her the satisfaction of seeing how much it had affected me. I walked out of that cafe with my heart pounding, my hands clenched, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be a ghost in this story. I wasn't going to let her slip away without consequences. Lauren had destroyed my trust, my love, my sense of reality. But she had underestimated one thing. She thought she had closed the book on me. She had no idea the story was just getting started. Leaving the cafe should have felt like closure, but it wasn't. The anger, the betrayal, the raw humiliation of it all sat like a burning coal in my chest. I had gone there hoping to see regret in Lauren's eyes, some acknowledgement that what she had done to me mattered, but there was nothing. Not guilt, not sadness, just mild irritation, as if I was a minor inconvenience, a footnote in a story she had already finished writing. That was when I knew I had to let go of the idea that I had ever been anything more than temporary to her. But knowing and accepting are two different things. I spent the next few days trying to push past it, to tell myself that what was done was done. But the more I tried to forget, the more the thoughts festered. Lauren had lied to me for 4 years, wasted my time, built an entire future with someone else while using me as a placeholder. And the worst part? She had gotten away with it. She had walked out of my life without a single consequence, slipping seamlessly into the one she had really wanted, leaving me to clean up the wreckage alone. I couldn't let that happen. I wasn't the type to seek revenge. It wasn't about pettiness or the need to ruin her life. It was about truth. Lauren had rewritten our history to fit whatever narrative she needed, and the world around her had accepted it without question. I wasn't going to let that stand. Emily was the only person who understood. When I told her what had happened at the cafe, she wasn't surprised. If anything, she seemed to have expected it. But she also knew me well enough to recognize that I wasn't going to just walk away from this quietly. And she had an idea. It started with something simple, a message. Not to Lauren, not to Ryan, but to someone who needed to know the truth. Ryan's family had no idea who I was. To them, Lauren was the perfect fiancée, the woman he had chosen to spend his life with, the love of his life. They didn't know she had spent the last 4 years living a lie. And as much as Lauren wanted to erase me from her past, there were some things that couldn't be buried. Emily and I gathered everything. Screenshots, timestamps, old photos. Proof that Lauren had been with me up until the very moment she had accepted Ryan's proposal. Proof that she had lied to him, just as she had lied to me. It wasn't just about exposing her. It was about making sure the person she had deceived the most knew exactly what kind of woman he was about to marry. I sent the message and waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. 2 days later, Ryan's engagement announcement disappeared from social media. His family, who had been flooding Lauren's posts with congratulations, suddenly went silent. Then, Lauren's profiles went private. And finally, the inevitable happened. Ryan contacted me. I hadn't expected it, but I wasn't surprised. I didn't know if he was reaching out to confirm the truth or to lash out in anger, but I didn't care. I had said what I needed to say, and whatever happened next wasn't my problem. But Emily, she had other ideas. She had been keeping an eye on everything, tracking the social media shifts, the subtle but undeniable signs of a relationship unraveling in real time. And then she found something unexpected. Lauren hadn't just gone private. She had deleted everything. Every photo, every post, every mention of Ryan. That was when I knew. She hadn't just been caught. She had lost everything. Ryan had ended it. His family had turned against her. The life she had chosen, the one she had so effortlessly discarded me for, had crumbled beneath her feet. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, I felt something close to peace. Not satisfaction, not happiness, just peace. Lauren had spent years making sure I never knew the truth. But in the end, the truth had found her anyway. And I didn't have to do anything else. She had destroyed herself. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The weight that had settled in my chest after Lauren's betrayal was still there, but it no longer suffocated me. The knowledge that she had finally faced consequences for what she had done didn't fix everything, but it helped. Emily kept me updated on the fallout. It was brutal. Lauren's entire world had crumbled in a matter of days. Ryan had completely cut her off. His family, who had once welcomed her with open arms, now treated her like she didn't exist. I heard through Emily that Ryan had been blindsided. He hadn't just been hurt, he had been humiliated. His engagement announcement had been public, his love for her on full display. And then, in the blink of an eye, everyone knew the truth. Friends, family, colleagues. Everyone knew that Lauren had spent 4 years living a double life, leading on not just one man, but two. She had been careful, but not careful enough. The truth had found its way to the surface, and there was nothing she could do to bury it now. I told myself I was done. I had gotten my answers, had seen justice in a way I never expected. But then something happened that I hadn't anticipated. Lauren reached out to me. It wasn't a call or a text. It was an email. No subject line. Just her name, sitting in my inbox like a ghost from the past that refused to stay buried. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The message was short. She wanted to talk. She didn't say why. She didn't offer an apology or an explanation. Just a vague statement that there were things I deserved to understand. I should have ignored it. There was nothing she could say that would change what she had done, nothing that would undo the years of deception or the way she had discarded me like I was nothing. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. Some wounds don't heal until you know why they were inflicted. I told Emily about the email, expecting her to talk me out of responding. Instead, she just sighed. She told me that if I needed to hear whatever Lauren had to say in order to fully move on, then I should do it. But she also warned me that I wouldn't get what I was looking for. People like Lauren don't admit fault. They don't take responsibility. I knew she was right, and yet I still agreed to meet her. We chose a cafe, neutral ground, a place that held no significance, no memories, no connection to the life we had once shared. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like she was trying to anchor herself. She looked the same, yet different. The confident, calculated woman I had once loved was gone. In her place was someone who looked smaller, hollowed out. She met my gaze as I sat down, but there was no hesitation, no guilt. Just something that almost resembled relief. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then finally she started talking. She told me how things had fallen apart, how Ryan had reacted when he found out, how his family had turned against her. She said she had never meant for things to happen this way. She said she had loved me, in her own way, but that she had always been waiting for something better, something that felt right. She told herself that what she had with me was good enough for now, that she could keep balancing both lives until the time came for her to make a choice. And when she did, she didn't hesitate. She had walked away from me without a second thought, because in her mind, it had always been temporary. I had never been the destination, just a rest stop on her way to the life she really wanted. I listened to everything she had to say, not because I cared, but because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear her say it out loud, that she had used me, that she had always known she wouldn't stay, that she had built our life together on false promises because she was too much of a coward to let go until she had something else lined up. She told me she regretted how things ended, that she wished she had been honest. She said she had lost everything, Ryan, his family, her own dignity, and that she didn't know where to go from here. Then she asked if we could be friends. The audacity of it hit me like a slap. After everything, after 4 years of lying to me, of leading me on, of wasting my time, she still thought she could keep me in her orbit. As if I would be willing to reduce myself to a consolation prize now that her world had fallen apart. As if she had any right to ask that of me. That was the moment I finally felt it. Not anger, not grief, not the raw sense of betrayal that had consumed me for weeks. I felt free, because the man sitting across from her wasn't the same man who had proposed to her in that restaurant. That man had been blinded by love, by trust, by the belief that she was his future. That man no longer existed. I stood up. I didn't say a word. I didn't tell her I forgave her. or that I hated her, or that I wished her well. I didn't owe her anything, not closure, not understanding, not a single shred of sympathy. I walked out of that cafe, leaving her behind the same way she had once left me. This time, it was her who had to watch me walk away. And I didn't look back.